And now we're going to welcome in our panelists. We have Helen, Kevin, Tara, Trisha, Stacy, Catherine, and everybody, we'd love to welcome our beautiful host with the most, Erin Patrice. Everybody give it up here. Let's welcome everyone.
Let's sit down. Have a seat. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. All right. Take my earring off. Keep hitting the mic. Are you too high? All right. Awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, I don't have my mic. I have this mic. I'm just looking for the other mic. Alexis, I took my earring out because it keeps knocking, so you have to Photoshop one in, okay? All right, welcome everybody. I appreciate you all for being here. I'm super excited about this topic today. And I want to kind of preface it with, we had a couple people who were not able to come today. And so we have one that shared their story via video. And then we had another person that had a different perspective that I'll talk about a little bit later. And then someone else. So we really had we still do, right? We still do have a very good spectrum of experiences and perspectives. So anyway, thank you all so much. I appreciate you all for being here today. I know this is not an easy topic, but that's why I'm so excited about it. That's why it's so good for us to do this. So I'm going to open with, first of all, welcome to the conversation. This is a time of the year when people start to explore this topic more. Data shows us that there has been a significant decline in people getting vaccinated since the introduction of the COVID-19 shots. We know vaccines have always been a divisive topic. People have disagreed about them for a long time. But in 2020, those disagreements were pushed into the spotlight in a way we had not seen before. I'll say I have not seen it that way before. And the COVID-19 vaccine didn't just bring out opinions, it exposed tensions that deeply impacted our families, our workplace, and our communities. People lost friendships over this. Some weren't invited to family gatherings, weddings, or allowed to visit loved ones. Others lost their jobs, especially those in healthcare and law enforcement, because of their personal choices around vaccination. On the other side, there were people who didn't want to be around those who got vaccinated, fearing the shot itself could put them at risk. So the divide was, and in many ways still is, very real. And when you step back, you realize that people tend to come to this conversation from different places: distrust, blind trust, lack of education, indifference, personal or generational trauma, simple curiosity, or even just poor communication from those meant to guide us. So all of that lives in this conversation. All of that deserves a space. That's why I've been wanting to have this dialogue, not to debate or point fingers, but to talk honestly about what happened and how it impacted us and where we go from here. We won't be able to cover everything about vaccines. This is a massive and complex topic, but we're going to open the door, step into it. So let's get into it together. Okay? Awesome. I'm going to jump right in, okay? First of all, I want to ask, what influenced your thoughts about vaccinations as a whole, right? And I know I mentioned the COVID-19 vaccine, but just vaccines as a whole, because in my preparation for this conversation, I talked to a lot of people in healthcare, and they all say the same thing, that people getting vaccines had declined drastically, right? The numbers had just plummeted. And they wanted to know why, right? And so, we know some of the reasons why, but people had a lot of concerns. So for you all here, what kind of influence the way you feel about vaccines as a whole, in general? Anybody want to go? Anybody want to shoot for the stars with this one? Go ahead, Kevin.
Okay, I'll jump in. As a child, I just followed what my parents did. It was important as a child that our family got their regular vaccinations when we were born, the measles, all those kind of things. And part of that was we had a family member that actually had polio. And so it had an influence on our full family too, the life that he lived for a very long time. He was one of the lucky ones that lived a long time, even with polio. But for my aunt, she never left her house for 35 years because she was caring for my cousin and could not leave the house. So for us, it was a personal thing. And then later in life, it was a decision that we made for the health of ourselves and then help protect those people around us too.
Thank you. Anybody else? Go ahead, Catherine.
Yeah, and the question was,
What influenced your thoughts on vaccines?
Okay.
Yep.
so I work in public health, and vaccines are probably second to clean water and sanitation in terms of lowering disease risk and saving lives. And also I've seen diseases that have been caused because folks weren't vaccinated. And so they're just such a powerful thing. We don't have smallpox anymore because of vaccination, and we don't need the smallpox vaccination anymore. And we've only had one case of polio in many decades because, again, of vaccination. So I just see that as just such a powerful thing in terms of keeping folks healthy and reducing the risk of death and disease.
Thank you. You want to say something, Tricia? See your face doing things.
My face is doing things. So, like Kevin, you grow up and you just, do what your family tells you to do. And then I had children of my own, and I trusted my physician to help me make those decisions. But my daughter was diagnosed with autism. And at the time, there was a lot of information going around the media about autism's being called, what's the word I'm looking for? Being caused by vaccines. And so I did have to think about that a little bit more and do some research on that to make a decision about vaccines and whether or not I wanted to continue to vaccinate my children.
Yeah. And did you want to add anything? Okay. And it's interesting because the one lady that was supposed to be here, but she works for the teachers union, and they had a emergency meeting tonight. But with that said, she was in the era, you remember when Jenny McCartney, is that her name, Jenny McCartney? Yeah. You guys remember when she had like that campaign against vaccines, and she too, her name is Amanda, was always against vaccinations. She was kind of in that era and rode that train, so to speak. And then she became a teacher, and her perspective was that once she saw how illnesses, impacted the classroom, now she's a strong advocate. But it took that for her to see it differently. But she too felt had a lot of the same questions that you had. So appreciate that. Anybody else want to add?
So my kind of in polar, I guess, opposite. It started a lot like you, Kevin, like you do what you're told. My parents vaccinated us, and we did exactly that with our first 3 children. Our first 3 kids, and so my journey is kind of extensive with this. It migrated from do what you're told, everything will be fine. I had 3 very, very sick children for about 7 years of our life, in and out of the doctor, probably once a month. And I just kept going. They said, give them Tylenol, bring them back, let's keep going. So I did what I was told. Then about 7 years later, I decided, we got pregnant again, and something just kind of clicked in me to start doing some investigating on what I really thought about vaccines. And it wasn't the anti-vax approach, and it certainly wasn't pro-vaccine as much as I was initially. So my, stewardship over the information is what changed, and I became more interested in the well-being for each child versus just a one-size-fits-all blanket approach to vaccination. So that's where I come in.
Okay. Awesome. So I want to ask you all, what do you think, and maybe people in the health field can maybe weigh on this a little bit more, but what are some common misunderstandings potentially about vaccines? Like, what have you heard that people, because everybody is an expert, right? We look on social media, everybody knows about everything, right? So what do you think some misunderstandings are? Yeah.
Well,
people think just because you get a certain vaccine that you're not going to get that illness, specifically COVID or the flu. They just are under that misconception that, oh, because I get this, I can't get sick or I won't get sick. That's a huge one.
Yeah. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, and then I want you to go, Catherine. When COVID first came out, wasn't that kind of talked about though? Like it was almost this idea that if you got it, the risk was extremely low or something like that. I don't remember. It was a long time ago. But I think that was what for that particular one, I remember that because everybody thought, okay, well, we get it. And then they were mad, right, later when they found out they could get it. But Catherine, I want you to weigh in. And I'm just speaking to your point you just made. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's true for certain illnesses. The flu and COVID are good examples because those viruses mutate quite a bit and they're always changing. When the COVID vaccine first came out, it was pretty effective, but then we had different variants, and as we went through the transition of different variants, the effectiveness of preventing disease went down, but thankfully the effectiveness for preventing severe illness, hospitalization, and death, it's still pretty effective in terms of preventing those endpoints. And the same with the flu vaccine. There was a campaign a couple years ago the CDC had, From Wild to Mild, and they were trying to emphasize just that flu vaccine, although they may not prevent the flu, the effectiveness kind of varies between 40 and 60% depending on the year and how close the match is. But typically people who get the flu shot tend to have a milder illness and less risk for hospitalization and bad outcomes.
Thank you. Anybody else want to add to that?
So I get to see a different population where people, even in the medical community, so I'm a naturopath, a traditional board-certified naturopath, and so people come in and they talk to me a little bit about why they're not vaccinating. So when I talk to you about what I'm doing here and what my purpose might be is, what are they saying? So, because I see both vaccinated, unvaccinated, across the board. It's actually not a prerequisite for any reason to come see me. Even during COVID, there was a lot of people saying, well, I'm not vaccinated, can I come to my appointment? So I took all that off the table and I see everybody for who they are, not just for what shots they have. But I get to hear even the medical community come into my office and say, I got this shot, the first Moderna or something to do with the COVID vaccine, and some of the outcomes were absolutely scary. They're telling me about it, and I just witnessed their story. I don't tell them, well, you shouldn't have, I don't do that. They come in and we start to look at what are some of the ways that we can open up this communication for healing what was damaged or healing what was broken. In a lot of cases, some didn't have the chance to heal because there were deaths because of it, and I got to hear those stories. So it made me a lot more compassionate that it is, again, not a one-size-fits-all topic in any way, especially with COVID.
Yeah, thank you. You want to add anything, Stacy? You're observing. We need you to talk. I don't need you to talk. You have a lot to say. Say something for me. Put you on the spot.
So I'm an RN, and I spent COVID timeframe working in neuro, PCU, and I had patients come in that had a stroke right after receiving the vaccine. So seeing worst case scenarios has made me go from getting shots for my family because that's what you do, to questioning everything down to the red dye and this mitt in front of my face. So
Sorry.
It's okay, girl. So just personally, I've witnessed that I went into the ER and had a lot of patients with multiple problems that they've said, I know people in the medical community don't like to hear this, but I was not this sick before I got this COVID shot. So countless times, I can't tell you the number of times that I heard that, and just hearing those experiences with people and having the opportunity to say, do I want to do this for the greater good, or do I want to take a minute and not, because it's my health that I have to live with. It's my body at the end of the day that nobody else has to answer to that, and that's for me, it's the choice now that I have for my family to question things and to see what the long-term
Impact or
effects are going to look like. Yeah.
Catherine, like you want to?
Yeah, I just want to clarify something in terms of what's called temporal association. And so sometimes something can be associated with something, but it may not be causative. And I'm not saying anything that folks have spoken about is so or is not so, but I'll give you an example of, so back in the wooden ships days, Columbus, people suffered from scurvy if they went and traveled on wooden ships. And so if that happened, you would think, okay, wooden ships cause scurvy, but it's the lack of vitamin C that causes scurvy. But it was associated with sailing because they didn't have citrus when they went and sailed. So what happens is there are studies that look at various potential side effects of vaccines, and they look at people who've been vaccinated, people who haven't been vaccinated, and look for safety signals. And I don't want to just only talk about COVID vaccine.
Sure. Yeah.
But in the case of that particular vaccine, billions of vaccines all over the world have been administered, and there's many, many studies. And the same with other vaccines. And there's certainly, risks and side effects. And, people can have serious allergic reactions. And so there can be serious consequences of vaccines, but those safety signals in studies are really looked for to make sure that it's not only a temporal association and look for that causative association. And a number of years ago, a researcher provided some fraudulent research saying that the MMR vaccine caused autism. And his research was found to be fraudulent, and there have been a whole bunch of other studies since, many, many studies since, that show there is no association between vaccines and autism. And so it's hard once you get that association to, not have that association, but sometimes these things may not be causative.
And thank you. I appreciate you saying that, because I did the research, and I had a newborn baby at home. So I had my 15-month-old that had been vaccinated and then diagnosed with autism at the same time that the media was blowing up about vaccines and autism. And so I didn't know the next step to take. But I had a family practitioner that I trusted, and I talked to him about it, and they gave me all of the inserts inside of the vaccine so that I could research everything about them. And I did my research, and the interesting thing was the thimerosal was already removed from the vaccines at the time that my children were vaccinated, so you couldn't really put that correlation there. But we also talked about what would be the next best step, and we chose to spread out the vaccines, because I was worried about all of these vaccines happening at one time in these tiny little bodies. And my doctor trusted me enough to be able to say, if you promise me you'll bring her back, then let's do this so that you're healthy and safe. Yep. Mm-hmm. And so you have to do your research, and you have to think, you have to think about what could have been happening inside of my life at that time. Was my daughter was her immune system already compromised from maybe being ill, or, there's a lot of different factors there when you see an injury that happens with a vaccine. But in our case, I did the research, and I was comfortable enough to be able to pursue helping my child, stay healthy. So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tara.
Yeah,
Thank you for sharing that.
yeah. To kind of follow what you said, I work in the non-clinical side of a health system, but I am surrounded by doctors and nurses, and it's interesting that you said that, because I have heard conversations from doctors and nurses about concerns some of them had, that parents have about potentially over-vaccinating. So just like you said, like so many at the same time, or so many so close together, and the over-vaccinating causing like some of those adverse side effects. That also could be, that's one of my influences too, is I listen to the people who should know, right? And I have done some case studies myself. I myself received a flu vaccine many, many years ago, and that made me really sick. I can't prove that that's what made me very, very sick, but I was in the hospital on IVs because I was dehydrated, 103 temperature, and it just so happened I had that shot at the same time. I no longer get that shot, even though the health system I work for kind of almost forces you to do that. If you don't, you have to wear a mask for all of flu season. So, but then I also do that, and I look around and I see all of my coworkers who have received their flu vaccines getting pretty sick with the flu and missing work anyways. So to me, that's a whole nother thing. But I just wanted to say, over vaccinating, I feel like that it has been a topic of providers and nurses that I have been around. So.
Have you heard that, Catherine and Stacy, with you all being thank you for sharing that. Have you all heard that?
As I choke on my water, my apologies.
No,
I went to say something, and it's the way it goes.
It's okay.
But to add to that point, that is something that over-vaccinating is a topic that I get to share with people, not from me to them, but they feel very strongly that that's what kind of is causing this buildup of toxicity in their body. So I get to hear, like, okay, so you got 3 combination shots all being given at one time. Is this a good idea? And I tell them, first and foremost, I'm not going to tell you what to do with your body or your child's body, but let's look at the ingredients, let's see what you feel, and talk to your doctor, have an open dialogue about spreading things out. But that conversation doesn't come very easily, because some doctors kick you out of their practice if you choose not to vaccinate according to the CDC schedule. Why do I know? Because we were. With my youngest child, we decided to spread them out at first. So I got her first one, and it was too much time in between, so I got dismissed from the practice. That isn't an uncommon story today.
So just to clarify, so you were a patient of his,
Yes.
or theirs?
Of theirs, yep.
And then they kicked you out because you did, okay.
And I happen to know this pediatrician, so I asked privately, I said, tell me what? Because, I mean, we're good, healthy. She was very healthy. What does this have to do with? And she said, I have to have so many % vaccinated in my office, or we, kind of get docked. It's a big conversation. There's money in vaccines, and nobody likes to kind of discuss that part because it is really hard to say. So I'm saying it.
Well, we're saying it today.
I know. You said to have fun. This isn't fun, but this is something. When I came, they say, what do people say?
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean,
This is what I hear.
we want to hear this. I mean, so yes, Catherine, let me say this really quickly, but hold your thought. I mean, I think that, just so I can put this out here, I think the only way for us to have a great conversation about this is that if we are honest, right? Because I think that is the problem that's going on, not just with vaccinations, but in general in our society, that people don't feel like they can share what they feel, right, without being either ostracized or kind of isolated. And I think doctors themselves are saying that people are saying this to them, right? So we should talk about it and then try to hopefully come to some type of understanding. Catherine, please.
Yeah, just wanted to clarify that the schedule put out by the CDC is the recommended schedule, and vaccines are studied given concomitantly together, and looking for, is there any adverse effect of that? The other thing is, if you look at all the ingredients in the childhood vaccines, there's only about 150 to 200, whereas many decades ago, there was a lot more ingredients because the vaccines were not as pure as they are now.
There was more than 150 to 200?
In all the vaccines.
Combined.
In all the vaccines combined.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
if you look
I just wondered.
many years ago, decades and decades ago, there were thousands and thousands of
Wow.
ingredients because they weren't as purified as they are now. And it's not recommended to split up the vaccines. It's recommended to follow the schedule for a number of reasons. The effectiveness of the vaccine is looked at in terms of the age recommendations, and also many, some patients do come back, but some patients don't come back, and then opportunities to protect people have been missed. So physicians are wanting to follow the schedule and do the recommended vaccine schedule so that we make sure we don't miss people and that people are protected. We do want to protect people.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you.
Currently, the CDC schedule's under pretty much like investigation, we'll say, trying to look at if it should be adjusted. How do you feel about that? Because there's more and more physicians also not wanting to like
Follow that schedule? Oh,
so
okay.
I just was curious what your thoughts are, because I hear it all in my office, including, nurse practitioners, PAs.
Yeah, yeah.
So that CDC schedule is always under review and is always being looked at to see if something, should we be doing something different? Is there some new safety signal? Should all the populations that we recommend this vaccine for, is it still relevant? And right now, there is the main confusion with the current schedule is COVID vaccines. And probably, again, we don't want to get stuck there because I think this is supposed to be more general about vaccines. But the ACIP was put into place in 1964. And pretty much they meet at least 3 times a year. And they look at the new research that has come out, and they evaluate vaccines, they evaluate new vaccines. Sometimes vaccines get removed from the market because maybe they don't work, maybe the risk is too great. In the 2000s, there was a Lyme disease vaccine that was removed from the market because of safety concerns. So that's always being looked at, and that was the role of that committee of the CDC, the ACIP. Now what has happened, and I don't want to overdo my time, but the ACIP was removed and replaced with folks who all but one are not vaccine or immunology or epidemiology experts, and recommendations are being made that did not come from a robust looking at the data. And so some groups are stepping in to fill that gap.
Okay, okay. And I found it interesting too when you stated that like Lyme disease, the vaccine was taken away because of how long, and I'm not trying to just quiz you and just interview you here, but how long does that take for them to come to that conclusion about, like what all, I guess as short as possible as you can say it, but like how do I want to say this? How long does it take for you to say, okay, this is not going well, let's take it back? Like what all has to happen
What
for
kind
them
of evidence do they need?
for them to say, you know what, this is not working well?
So I guess it really depends. It's situational.
Okay, yeah.
And I don't think it's not like a one size fits all.
Okay. I'm just curious what that looks like. So thank you. And I promise, Catherine, you were not supposed to get the only person here getting beat up on. We had other people, but they backed out. So I apologize. They left you hanging. So I apologize about that.